recording me. I'm recording me. There we go. A really warm welcome to this Babies and Toddlers morning. My name's Anna Hawkin and I'm part of the team here at Parenting for Faith. Lots of my lovely colleagues are here as well, who you're going to meet later, including Rachel Turner, who is the founder and now the grandmother of Parenting for Faith. You're going to be meeting them and hearing from them a lot later. We are so glad you are here. We are so grateful you have given up this morning. We know it is really hard to coordinate the puppies and the food shopping and the sick children and the toddler groups, and that you are busy people, but we are just so excited that you want the babies and toddlers in your life and in your church and your community to meet and know God. We have seen up and down the country and across the world this happening, and we just want it to happen more and more. So thank you so much for saying yes and for really pressing in this morning. We were praying just beforehand and we really feel like God has prepared the way and we're excited for what he's going to do. So a little bit of housekeeping to start off. As I said, we are going to be recording these sessions and each of the seminars. So if you'd prefer not to be in a recording, if you could turn your camera off, particularly if you've got under 18s with you, please, that would be really helpful. And if you could mute, sort of standard Zoom etiquette, when someone else is speaking, if you could mute. But we would love you to engage, ask questions, add comments, all of that kind of thing. So we'll be doing that primarily through the chat function. And then we will go into breakout groups a little bit later. So there you'll have a chance to chat and process a bit more. If the mere sound of the words breakout groups has made you shudder and you think, I cannot think of anything worse, do not worry at all. There is an opt-out option. You can choose to reflect and process on your own if that's more helpful for you. So don't worry, you don't have to fake an excuse. We have catered for you. I think that's all I need to say now. We'll be sharing a little bit more. We were talking at the start about this book. Oh, this is where the background doesn't work. Sorry, fake background. But the Babies and Toddlers Nurturing Your Child's Spiritual Life book, which I know many of you have got, and the Babies and Toddlers bite-sized videos and resources, which are on our website. Those are all available free. And if you'd like to know more about that, I'd really encourage you to go to Becky and Ruth's session later. But we'll be sharing a little bit more and we'll give you a link to our website as well so that you can find out about that. But without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Emma Olorenshaw. Emma has been a friend of Parenting for Faith for many years. She is so wise in so many things. And most recently, she's been doing a master's in, I want to say, early infancy and childhood.
Pretty much, infancy and early childhood.
There you are. I was close. I should have checked, really. She's also the children's minister at St. Peter's Maidenhead, and yeah, has been doing some research, been involved in kind of the analysis and looking at some research that has looked at the effects of the pandemic on families and their faith. So we're really excited to hear from Emma. So I'll hand over now.
Thanks, Anna. Hi. Anna, would you be able to make my other
Absolutely
a co-host? Yes. I've called it Emma Olorenshaw Slides.
That's incredibly helpful, and I'd said I'd do that and I haven't, so thank you.
Thank you. Cool. So if I do this and then we'll just get the text sorted. Oh, I hate the little bar thing. Right, can you see that? Now I can't hear anyone. Anna's nodding. Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. So yeah, my name is Emma. As Anna said, I'm the children's minister at St. Peter's Church in Maidenhead. I live here with my husband, Callum, and our golden retriever, Molly, who may or may not make an appearance. I have plied her with treats. So hopefully she's only like 10 months old, so she's a bit crazy, but hopefully will remain chilled. And yeah, I've been involved in Parenting for Faith for quite a while, about 7 years or so now, doing it in my job as a children's minister. And as Anna said, I've recently I've spent the last 5 years studying infancy and early childhood development. So babies, toddlers, preschoolers, and the kind of support structures that exists to help their development, so physical, emotional, and now spiritual, which is cool. So as part of my final project this year, I have been involved in this big research study across the UK to examine how the COVID pandemic has impacted the faith and in families of all sorts of families across the UK. And then I've particularly been zooming in on the under fives. So I'm going to share a whole host of bits and bobs from that this morning. And hopefully it will encourage us, challenge us, inspire us. That's the aim in our various roles in the lives of babies and toddlers. And so I'm going to dip in and out of a few different things, but my prayer is that God would speak to each of us. So nudging us on just one thing or two things, or just a couple of things that are helpful or interesting, that might feel like, oh yeah, that's really relevant to me and my context, or even like, oh, I'm not sure I agree with that, or that makes me feel uncomfortable, because I think those are the things that maybe God might be speaking to us about. So can I pray before we start, if that's all right? God, thank you for this opportunity to gather together. And I thank you that you're with each and every one of us, wherever we are, whatever's going on in our rooms and our houses and our churches, you know where we're at. And I pray that you would speak to us this morning, that you'd nudge our hearts, that you would spark our interest, and that you would just catch our attention with what you're trying to say. Amen. So I've been thinking about this talk for a little while, and I was praying about it, and I felt like God reminded me of a baby shower I went to recently for some good friends of mine. It wasn't a traditional baby shower. It was one of those, it was like a garden party, barbecue, housewarming, pre-baby arrival fun. And it was classic English barbecue because it was raining and we were stood under gazebos eating burgers with 5 layers on. But it was great. And in that process, I was struck by how we were just such a random group of people all gathered together around the life of this unborn baby and this couple. So there were parents excited to be grandparents. There were siblings looking forward to being aunts and uncles. There were friends from school, university, college, colleagues, you know, all sorts of different people that some of us had met before, some of us hadn't, all in one space. And we were all there kind of around this couple. And as you do, we were kind of sharing memories and moments from the past, reminiscing together, and also kind of looking forward to the future, playing those games where you predict the birth weight of the baby, or suggesting wonderful names, or designing baby grows, I don't know, things like that. So we were thinking about our hopes and dreams for the future for this family, but also kind of sharing our wealth of experience in different fields, I suppose. And I felt like that was a really good metaphor for what we're kind of here for today with this conference. So we all have different experiences, we all have different roles with children and under fives, as we've kind of noticed in that poll that Anna did. But ultimately, we're all here because we care about the spiritual lives of babies and toddlers in our lives. And this is an opportunity to kind of gather together, to share stories, to reminisce, to think about significant moments and memories, but also to look forward to the future together with hopes and dreams and fears and concerns and all that kind of holds, all the while saying, you know what, it's okay because we're in it together. So I wanted to just really quickly reflect on a passage from the Bible. So in Luke chapter 9, we hear all about Jesus sending out his 12 disciples to do his work. So this is where we see whether my slides work. Yes. Okay, fab. So this is a passage from Luke chapter 9. I put it up there for those of you that like to read it yourselves. But basically, it's classic. We know it, right? Jesus has called his disciples, he's equipped them, he's trained them up, they've seen him do some awesome stuff, and they've heard all his teaching, and now it's their turn. So he kind of gathers them up, he reminds them that they've got God's power working in them, and he sends them out to the surrounding towns to have a go, to share the gospel and to heal the sick. And this is a great passage, and it's one that we often hear about. But the bit I have not thought so much about was the next bit. Okay, so what happened when they returned? And we don't actually know very much about it, as far as I can work out. It's pretty much just a sentence in the next passage of Luke. And it literally says this. I've lost my arrow on my screen, so I can't minimize anything. Let's do this. Then I can read it from here. Here we go. So when the apostles returned, they reported to Jesus what they had done. Then he took them with them, and they withdrew themselves to a town called Bethsaida with the crowd, but the crowds learned about it and followed him. He welcomed them, spoke to them about the kingdom of God, and he healed those who needed healing. So then Jesus goes on to feed mass numbers of people. And anyway, it's literally a sentence. They reported to Jesus what they had done. But I found myself wondering, what did they share, and what would it have been like to come back together, having been off on all these adventures with people that they knew and spent time with, and what kind of things would they be sharing? So I don't know, maybe they would be, I wondered whether they'd be showing off like, oh, I healed a lady's leg. Oh, that's great. But I healed a man's leg and his ear, and like, oh, we saw this and we saw this, and that kind of thing. Or whether they would share the kind of funny moments from their journey, the jokes that they'd shared, or the really bizarre foods that they'd been given by their hosts at various points. Or I wondered whether they were honest, whether they shared with one another the highs and the lows. So, you know, the stories of success, but also the times that things didn't work out. The amazing miracles they saw, but also maybe the times where their fear or their doubt maybe caused them to walk on by, or not to offer to pray for that person that they felt like maybe they should. And the disciples were just like us, right? They were effectively a bunch of people from all different walks of our life brought together by this one common goal and purpose. And they were off on God's mission. And it was a thrilling and challenging mission. And it seems to me that maybe Jesus brought them back together to kind of regroup. So they returned together, presumably shared with one another what they had learned and experienced. They told Jesus, it says that, the things that they'd seen and done. And then we see, as we read on, that he continued to disciple them, that he showed them again who he was. He performed amazing miracles. He corrected them where they were still clearly not quite understanding what he meant. And before he ultimately sent them back out on the next part of their mission. And I feel like right now, this is an opportunity for us. It's like a season of life where we are regrouping, a bit like the disciples. It's a season to lean in and to listen to one another, to share our stories and our experiences, the highs and the lows, and to refocus again on who God is and what he's saying. Now, I totally hear you if you are thinking, no, it's way too late. That ship has sailed, that moment has gone, because that is the feeling that most of us have. So both the research and the conversations I've had with most people, and my personal experience as well, would say that we all had these hopes and expectations during the pandemic of how life was going to be different. And yet we have all kind of very often fallen back into the things that we were doing before. So, you know, people who had more space and time throughout lockdown, busy parents that enjoyed somewhat of a bit of a change to normality, have report that they are thrown back into the craziness of life, and that they're just so busy. Busyness comes up in like really highly in a lot of the research that we've been doing, and that, yeah, we're kind of reverted back to that pre-pandemic state of being. And as a children's minister, I know that I had like a whole load of hopes of like, yeah, we're going to do this differently, and I'm going to think about doing this differently, and I'm going to change this. And then just maybe without realizing it, we've kind of reverted back to what we were doing before, not necessarily intentionally, but like because it's really hard to do new stuff, and like often it's easier to do the things that we've already done before. And so I found myself thinking, God, we've totally lost that opportunity to regroup. Like, we're back into the swing of life. There's no way. But I felt like God was really saying that we haven't lost the opportunity to regroup, that it's not too late to listen to our experiences of the last few years. And that if we can really do this well, then I just saw Anna's message, that's fine. If we really want to do this well, then it will make sense, and it will give us time to grow, and it will help shape where we're going in the future as God sends us out on the next phase of our mission, which is ultimately to nurture the spiritual lives of the little ones in our community. So our research study was one way of doing this. It was a way of listening to the experiences of families across the UK, and to find out how they had found the pandemic and how it had impacted their faith in particular. And so we used an online survey, which was made available by a load of Christian organisations, including Parenting for Faith. And we had just under 200 responses come back. So it was a really nice mix of people from all over the country. Some of you may well have done it, for all I know. And it was a whole different load of ages, demographics, church backgrounds, all sorts of different things. And I just want to briefly share a couple of the highlights that we have identified that you might find useful or interesting. And I don't think they'll be revolutionary to you, but hopefully interesting. So I've got another little poll, if that's okay. Anna, I think, has control of doing this. I was wondering whether you can share. Here we go. Did the pandemic change the way you or your church or your family, so you can, whatever context you're in, you can answer it, change how you approach faith? And have any of those changes remained? It'd be really interesting to see. Let's see. How many people do we have in?
Thank you, everyone who's responding. We've got 120 people.
Cracking.
And about half of you
there we go.
have
Half
already.
Gone so far. Thank you.
So I'll give you a little bit longer. I get to see as it's happening. It's very exciting.
Oh yeah, I forget that no one else can see it when it pops up on your screen.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah. We will, I assume you'd like us
there.
to reveal the results once a few more people have answered.
Thanks, Anna.
We got over 100. People are desperately trying to find the button. Sometimes it pops up, doesn't it, on your phone or something, and you think, I wanted to respond to that. We got 109 of you.
It's not the end of the world.
Really,
it's just interesting. Interesting question to answer. Okay, you can now see the results. So of us that have answered, 84% of us have said yes, it changed, and 68% of us have said that yes, those changes have stayed, which is interesting because that's fascinating, because it is pretty much identical. Now, this is where I did have my slides, but I realized that I didn't want to keep jumping in and out myself, and I don't want to. I know that then sometimes you lose my face, so I don't know what you want me to do, but we'll go for it now.
Slides are good now. It was just
slides are good. Yeah, I just couldn't. I don't know how to do jumping in and out of it. Anna, you can take them down if.
Got it.
I mean, although to be honest, now I've completely seemingly lost them. Okay, maybe we'll just go without them. That's fine. Right, that was. Okay, so 84% of the under fives. So clarify, this study was for people with children of all ages up to 16, well, up to 18. And then we took the teenagers out and used them separately. And then we did a whole load of work on the kind of primary age group. And then I've done a whole load of work just on under fives. So the stuff I'm going to share now is just on under fives. And that might mean they also have an older child, but it means that they said that they had an under five as well. So 84% of them, which is pretty much, well, that is exactly what we just did on our poll, said that lockdown or the pandemic had changed the way that their families approached faith. And 65% of them said that at least some of these changes had remained. So yes, there is this narrative that in some ways we've reverted back to some of what we did before. But actually 65% of people said that something that they changed in lockdown around their faith has actually remained since then. So if those changes are, now obviously it's still quite soon to know whether or not they are permanent changes, but if they are changes that are still around at the moment, then it feels like it makes sense to think about what those changes are and how they might impact us. So whether you're a parent, whether you're a church leader, whether you're a toddler group leader, a children's leader, whatever, hopefully this is kind of helpful to think about. And as I say, I'm not sure they're totally revolutionary, but it's cool when the data says things that we see. So there was two main shifts that I wanted to kind of share with you. And the first shift was a shift from church to home. Okay. And so it's not really a surprise with church buildings being closed and many events, particularly for under fives, not really happening very well on Zoom, to hear that generally there was a focus from church being the primary place of discipleship to the home being of more significance for family faith. So just under half of the under five parents in our survey said that they engaged less with their local church than they did pre-pandemic, and just over half said that they engaged with more faith practices at home than they did pre-pandemic. So faith practices, there was a whole list of things like Bible reading, prayer, watching content online, listening to worship music, to having conversations about faith, all sorts of things. And so it's interesting, the data suggests that church has that there was this shift from church to home. And all of the under fives parents in our survey recognised that they had a role as primary disciplers of their children, which is cool. And positive of that was that over half of them said they felt well supported by their church in doing this. So loads of the under five, or all of our under five parents said that they felt like it was their role to disciple their children, and that the church was positively, and so many of them said that the church was helping them in doing this, which is pretty awesome, I think. I've just seen Rachel's question, do we know if this is a positive change that has stayed? Yes, there's some evidence to suggest that people, this is one of the changes that has stayed. We are still working on the ins and outs of who said what and who said what changed, because they were totally open-ended questions. So anyone could say what had changed in the pandemic. And then we have to work out what they said and then whether or not they said it stayed. So there's still work going on. But yes, interestingly, seems that in many cases it is staying. So the first shift was from church to home. And then the second shift that we saw in the data was from Sunday to every day. So when we asked people, again, openly, how the pandemic had changed their family's approach to faith, the most commonly reported thing, so we gathered it all together and we grouped it by themes and did a whole load of coding work, said that the change was in their attitude towards church. So that was the big headline when we asked them what had changed. Their attitude towards church had changed. And in particular, we found that 64% of those responses that said that they had experienced a change were people saying that they were less dependent on Sunday services, that they had less engagement and attendance with their activities in their church building, and that they had an increased focus on making faith a part of their everyday lives. And interestingly, when we asked what is beneficial to them, and we just say what was beneficial to your faith, or what is beneficial to your faith experiences, the top three, I did have a graph somewhere. I can send any of that to anyone that wants to see more of it. But the top three were worship music, prayer, and Bible reading, followed by church. So church was number 4. So worship music, prayer, and Bible reading. Worship music and prayer, off the top of my head, were the same. They came out the same. And Bible reading slightly under. And that's broadly grouped. So Bible notes or Bible stories, anything comes under the Bible. So those 3 things, so worship music, prayer, and Bible reading, came out. And it was really interesting when you read through it, because so many people were noting how they had become part of their everyday routines. So particularly they would note things like being in the car, or being on the way to nursery, or meal times, bedtimes, stuff that we know, and stuff that often is where babies and toddlers have faith input into their life, but it seemed that they were the things that parents were drawing out as most important, these kind of everyday routines and integrating faith into them. And I mean, even just this week, I've heard a couple of stories from my church family about prayer and amazing times of prayer with their under fives, and how they were just so much more than they realized they were ever even capable of. And a great story of a little one who had been learning worship songs at home and just listening to them, and then suddenly in a totally different context started singing this worship song that made complete sense as an adult in that context. And they'd clearly taken this truth from one thing to another thing, to another context, and kind of really taken that on board, and how amazing it was for their family. And so these things of prayer, of songs, of Bible stories, integrating them into our daily lives seems to be what families are saying they have come out of the pandemic with, which I think is pretty cool. So we're not saying that church is not helpful at all. Church consistently across all the questions comes up as really important, comes up as something that families need and want and engage with. But yeah, it's just interesting that this shift from Sunday morning focus to everyday focus is definitely something that we've seen. And finally, the last kind of thing that we asked was, how would you like us to support you? How would you like to be supported by your local church, by the church community, by broader organisations? And the four things that kind of stood out as important that they wanted was, firstly, training and resources for sharing faith at home. And Parenting Faith, a great example of doing that. But it was interesting. So many parents, that's what they want, and that's what they've asked. They want their churches to provide training and equipping and encouraging to share their faith at home with their kids. And I know my personal thing is that during lockdown, it was very easy to do that and focus on that. But as I've been doing more and more activities in the church, again, you have less time, and it's very easy to swing back into resourcing your in-person activities and less resourcing their faith at home journey. So that was one. Overwhelmingly, people wanted support. They wanted care. They wanted contact. They wanted events where they could get to know people. It was really interesting how much came out of this survey of people saying how much belonging mattered, how much relationship mattered, how much they wanted to feel cared for by their local church. Like, people knew their kids' names, people knew what was going on in their lives, people asking for space to just hang out and to get to know other people in their church. And it came up time and time again that the pandemic had changed the way that they viewed the relationships with people in church, and that they valued them so much more than ever before now, and that they want to invest in those going forward, and that's one thing that they think that we can do to help provide support for them. And interestingly, another one that I just wanted to throw in, it wasn't as high on the list, but I think it's particularly relevant for this group, was good Sunday content for under fives. It came up quite a few times of parents saying that they wanted something in their groups that wasn't just a creche, but had teaching like content or songs or prayer. And people say it in different ways, but basically there were lots of people asking to be resourced better on a Sunday morning for helping babies and toddlers connect with God in that context. And so really, I hope that's interesting. There's loads of questions to ask. The full research is coming out, so there is going to be loads more stuff coming out over the next few months about it. And if you're somebody that likes the facts and the figures and the questions, then you'll be able to dig into that a little bit more. And it's a conversation starter, really. It's not the end goal, but what can we learn from lockdown? How can we share our experiences of the last few years, particularly thinking about those babies and toddlers in our lives, and how we can doing what we're doing as a parent, as a church leader, as a toddler group leader, whatever, how can we be supporting the families in their new needs in this season of life? And I hope if you're a parent that it validates your feelings if any of those things are things that you've been feeling, other people are feeling them too. And if you're a church worker, I hope it's an encouragement that you're not redundant, because people are constantly, they want this support, they want the church to come alongside them. Both church leaders and parents said that they felt like it was a partnership between parents and church that was was needed for faith development in children and under fives. So yeah, we're all important, and how we support parents in their roles as carers at home and disciplers at home, and how we can, as a church, support a shift to everyday discipleship as well as on a Sunday, I think is something really interesting to contemplate. And I guess just a reminder to continue to give space to sharing experiences, to hearing from the families around you, to chatting to your other friends about how they found lockdown, and to really use that time to ask God what he's teaching us and how he wants us to move forward. So I realise that's not massively practical, but we're about to move on to the seminars. And I think, looking at the seminar list, they hit a lot of those different areas. So whichever thing has sparked an interest in you, you'll be able to choose the right seminar to make sense with that.
That is exactly right. Thank you so much, Emma. That was really interesting, really encouraging. As she says, so it's Sarah Holmes and others at Liverpool Hope University who've done that research. Some of you have already seen an infographic that's come out. There will be a chance to ask questions to Emma later, and a chance to discuss in groups as well. But we are going to head into our seminars now. And the way that you're going to do this is by clicking on a breakout room. I know many of you are comfortable with this. If you're not, don't worry, we will help you. But the 3 seminar options will come up. And if you click the little arrow next to it, don't try and click your name while it's moving, because there's 120 of us and it will keep scrolling. So the little arrow next to the title that you want, and click to go into that room. You have 3 options. The first one is helping under fives meet and know God. That can be for your family or your church or your community. We're going to be looking at how to get them praying, how to read the Bible with them. So really practical stuff, like Emma said. Your second option is with Rachel Turner, and she's going to be looking at preparing for infant baptism, christening, dedication, naming, Thanksgiving, whatever happens in your church tradition with little people. And how do we come alongside families and support them in that? And your third option is refreshing parents and carers through toddler groups. Caroline Montgomery has a new role as Refresh Pioneer. She started doing something in a local church that refreshed the parents and carers in the toddler group. And it has been so successful and so amazing that she's now writing a book, and it's spreading across the country. It's really exciting. So if you want to look at supporting and resourcing the parents and carers, please go to Caroline's seminars. So yes, they will all be recorded, don't worry. But if we could open the breakout rooms now, then people can select where they would like to go.